This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer, and you want to get your first book published. So, go with what you know. So many first-time and long-time authors have told us that's the best way to go. If you love it, you're going to find out more about it. You're going to do the research. You're going to spend hours writing and rewriting. And in the end, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be pretty happy with what you came up with. Kathleen Kelly is a big fan of King Richard III. He's the subject of her first published book. It's called The Protector. This is historical fiction, and Kathleen took on the daunting task of deconstructing King Richard. She didn't believe he was the evil man Shakespeare wrote about. She decided to dust off a book she'd written about Richard back in 2012 when his bones were discovered in England. She gave it to some friends. Some of them were scholars. They liked it. And she knew she was ready to take the next step. Send it to Page Publishing. Kathleen.
The title is kind of ironic in a way because, of course, he wasn't supposed to become king in his own right. King Richard, who was Duke of Gloucester, he was the king's younger brother, but actually his only brother at that time. King Edward IV died unexpectedly, and he appointed Richard to be the protector of the new king, who was only 12 years old, and of the realm of England. So Richard was thrust into power. He had been in the north of England. He had been very happy there, just doing his own thing, but suddenly he became pivotal in this whole new regime. So as protector, he was supposed to guard the rights of his nephew, the 12-year-old new king, but he found that very difficult because the new king had been influenced to Richard's detriment by his mother's relatives, the Woodvilles.
So you have a fascination with Richard.
I do.
Why?
He's an interesting character. You know, I always thought he was the villain that Shakespeare portrayed, and it was a great surprise when I found out that he maybe wasn't. You know, that maybe he had been smeared by Tudor propaganda after he was killed. So,
are you a history teacher? I mean, most people don't just pick King Richard out of a, I think I'll write about King Richard.
Well, how did this happen? Yeah, I mean, I was an English major, actually. I have a master's in English, so I studied literature, but I've always had a fascination for England and for English history. And I was doing some reading and actually a Thomas B. Costain books on the kings of England. And the last one was called The Last Plantagenets, and Richard was the last Plantagenet.
Right.
And so I was expecting, of course, to get the same heavy dose of vitriol that Shakespeare had leveled against Richard. And I found out that that was not the case at all, And so then I did quite a bit more research, and I read about Richard's life and before he became king, before he became protector. And so that just didn't fit with what was known about him up to that point. But there's no denying that he took the throne from his nephew, and that is something that you can't just excuse. Why did he do that? And my book is about that, the reasons why, whether or not it was justified in his mind and in the mind of the people around him, and what happened. I pick a 7-month period in his life to focus on.
And then deconstruct his actions.
Yes, what happened, why he did it. His relationships with actually 2 of his most loyal followers, but both of them turned against him, and why that happened. And it was different reasons for each of them at different times. But that is the focus of the story, his relationship with these 2 men, actually.
If I remember correctly, one of them was the Duke of Buckingham.
He came to Richard's aid when Richard became the protector and had to gain custody of the young king, which in itself was a sort of a struggle. But he helped Richard do that, and then he became his right-hand man. And actually, in the book, there was something more to the relationship than just a political one. And that's really at the heart of the story, the feelings between the 2 men. Richard found himself very attracted to Buckingham in my telling of the story. Now, this is fiction.
Right.
But when I read the facts of the story, it seemed to me that maybe there was more there than met the eye, that Buckingham seemed to respond sort of like a jilted lover and turned against Richard for reasons that weren't quite clear unless there was something more there to the relationship, in my eyes. And this book is very character-driven. The events are all come out of the characters themselves, that what they do and how they react.
So now your challenge is to get this book noticed by historical fiction fans.
Yeah, I did a big book signing in May when it first came out, and it was also my birthday, so I kind of had a combination birthday book signing party. And I've sold about 80 copies personally. Actually, right now, I'm going to try to do now that I have all my publicity stuff, which just arrived last week, I'm going to go out to try to get some book signings. One bookstore that's interested is the Common Language Bookstore in Ann Arbor, and that is an LGBT bookstore because of the theme.
Okay.
One of my friends who knows the owner thought it might be something that they would be interested in. They hadn't expressed an interest, but we haven't set up a time yet.
Absolutely. I mean, oh my God, how many stories are there of the goings-on from the Roman Empire through the British monarchy? What are you kidding me? Homosexuality was rampant.
It was. And I'm not saying that Richard was gay per se, in what we think of it today, but I think that he had leanings in that direction, and he, usually managed to stifle them. But in this case, he found himself attracted to this golden personality that was Buckingham.
Right.
Facile-tongued, just
brilliant.
Yeah. They do have one episode together, and then Richard just was so repulsed by the thought of what he had done that he would no longer continue the relationship in that vein. And Buckingham felt hurt and betrayed, I guess, and ultimately decided, well, why can't I be king? My blood is as blue as Richard's. Why can't I be? And so then he started to rebel against Richard. And there's one other character in the book who's very important, and that is Bishop Morton, who was actually a mover in a lot of what happened behind the scenes.
Okay. A
puppeteer, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually became very prominent in Henry VII's reign. Became his Lord Chancellor and became Archbishop of Canterbury and a cardinal of the church. Huh. But what he did in my book is not at all holy. Let me just say that.
Were any of them holy? They were all political pawns.
Probably none of them were holy.
I mean,
right.
From the Pope all the way down. I mean, geez, the monarchies with the Pope.
I know. There was so much. Yeah. Well, they were human. They were human.
They were human.
And Richard was human.
All right, Kathleen, good stuff. Next up, a prequel about Richard and his wife, Anne, when they were children. Bruce Thompson has a penchant for crime novels and psychological thrillers. So after 28 years in the coal industry and then running Caterpillar for a while, he finally got to work on his book entitled Justice Awakened. Bruce.
It's a psychological thriller about a superstar female FBI agent, and her boss gets promoted and she gets promoted also. In the meantime, they're running an investigation on the murder of an assistant U.S. attorney in New York. And during that investigation, she discovers and her team discovers a lot of police corruption. So it turns into an awfully fast-paced novel with some first-rate psychopaths. And everybody that's read it, and I've had 5 different people read it, independent of the publisher, they all say the same thing. Fast-paced, page-turner with a good plot, well-developed and unforgettable characters. I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I want.
How did you know how to write a novel, though? How did you embark on that?
I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but I'm pretty smart. I figured you sit down, you start writing, and see how it comes together. I've read so many novels that you kind of develop a feel for style and what needs to be and how it needs to work in the pacing of the novel. And so I think I rewrote every page 5 times of every page I wrote.
Did you have people reading it as you went along, or did you finish it and then put it out there?
I finished it, and then I employed a proofreader.
Okay.
And she read it and did the proofreading, and then I submitted it to Page Publishing after it was fully proofread.
Okay.
Then I submitted to Page Publishing, and they came back and said, okay, we like what we see. We've reviewed it, and we're willing to publish it. And to be quite honest with you, Alice, I'm 96,784 words into the second novel in this trilogy I'm writing.
This is a trilogy?
Amy Johnson is the character, the main character.
Okay.
And I'm developing her more fully in the second novel, and the third novel will also be about her.
That's great. So you're really enjoying this.
I'm having a ball. And the lady that did the proofreading, after she was finished with it, she said, it got to the point where she was trying to work and proofread, and it got to where she couldn't do that, so she took and just read the entire novel. And then she went back and proofread it. And she said it made her happy, it made her sad. She said it made her mad. She said one place it made her physically ill. She said, "Are you writing another one?" I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Great."
Jeez, that's okay. Good. So now you're on a roll. You've retired, and now you're an author. You calling yourself an author now?
Well, I'll call myself an author after the second book.
All right.
I'm gonna make sure the first book is just not by pure happenstance and luck.
Are you telling people about it?
I have a book signing scheduled for the local Barnes & Noble in Idaho Falls on September 8th.
That's great. That's your first one?
First one, yes.
You inviting everybody you know?
Everybody I know. Sometimes people I don't know. When I know people, I say, you come and bring all your friends that can read.
Are you buying a bunch of books?
I did 10. The complimentary issues were sent to me as the author, and they evaporated immediately in my immediate family. And now I just got a shipment of 20 books, and I have friends locally that I'm signing books for, and so I think it will hopefully develop a life of its own and move forward.
All right. What's the ultimate?
Is to be a well-received author that people can rely on for quality work that is financially rewarding.
Good enough, Bruce. Can't ask for more than that. G.J. Moses was keeping friends up to date on his wife's cancer diagnosis when some of them noticed he was a pretty good writer. It was then a story about someone who tried to help and protect people came to mind, and he wrote The Protectors, Eric's story.
Oh, it's about two young people that go to a fair, and on their return home from the fair, and it's to celebrate the young boy's birthday and everything. It's him and his sister. They're accosted by a group of people, and where they're all scared and afraid of what's going to happen. They're rescued by a group of individuals that try to protect anybody they come upon. In other words, if they see something happening, kind of like a support group. They save them from that occurrence, and the two become involved with the group, and the whole story is about how Eric becomes involved with the group, and through the years, how he can pay that group back for all the help and assistance that he gave them. His sister becomes involved with one of the main characters, and it's his story about what he sees of this group with these different characters, and how it goes through, and how they interface back and forth. And, got some action, it's got some romance, and I think it's a fun book.
Fun book, and you enjoyed writing it, obviously.
Oh, I loved it to death. It was a passion. My wife, as she put it, I'd write for 24 hours in a row, and she'd go, "Man, you're on a roll." And it's like, yep, don't bother me now.
That's great.
So, I enjoyed it. I loved it.
Will you keep writing?
Oh, absolutely. I'm already on a second book, and I switched it over to science fiction. I like action science fiction books, and I'm about 2/3 done on that one now.
So you're retired, or?
I'm going to be in the next year or so. I'm a director for a support group out of Dallas, a company called Brit Systems. They're a medical imaging company.
Okay.
So I've been with them 11 years. I retired from IBM after 30 years.
Oh, you did?
After 30 years, I figured I'd better move on. But my old boss, who I used to work for in IBM, he was biking down a trail in Dallas, and I was rollerblading, and we met up, and he said, just out of curiosity, what are you going to do after your 30 years? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'll stick with IBM or not, because, it wasn't really a secure position. So he said, well, I got a job for you. And his wife had started up Brit Systems, and he had gone over to there, and he said, would you be interested in joining? That was 11 years ago.
I'll be darned. Good for you.
Yeah.
But you've always wanted to write. Is that it?
Oh, always wanted to write. Just never got around to it.
I hear that all the time from people. So now you're on it, and by the time you retire, you'll have 6 books out.
That's what I'm hoping. Family and friends, and they're all reading it, and they're all starting to put a couple of them put out a couple reviews on Barnes & Noble. My sister works for a library outside of Philadelphia. She's trying to see about getting that submitted to the library. So I'm excited about that. I'm pretty close with all the neighbors. I just got my first set of books. They finally just finished to the point where I could order them. And they just arrived last Friday. or actually Saturday. So I'm planning to give them out and sign them out and let them enjoy it.
All right, GJ, we have to take a quick break, but we are coming right back. Stay tuned. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. Ever hear of a place called Shemya? It's 230 miles from Russia, 1,400 miles from Anchorage at the end of the Aleutian Islands. It's also the name of Tom Fiesel's book. Tom was an electronic technician with the Air Force where he worked on navigational aids, gear that airplanes set their courses by, and he was in charge of the TAC handset. This is his story of survival on this remote island off the coast of Alaska.
First of all, when I got there, the TAC handset was in a miserable condition, and my attention was focused on getting the TAC handset working properly, and that was an ongoing problem for several months because the supply situation at the end of the Aleutian chain was rather slow. The weather on Shemya is indescribably bad. I was on the website a few minutes ago, and it's the hot season at Shemya. It's not even 50 degrees.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, it's a pretty miserable existence up there. That was compounded by the fact that when I got there, the truck that I inherited from the guy that I was replacing was an old Falcon pickup truck, and that got replaced pretty quickly with a gorgeous new Ford 6-passenger pickup truck that was way bigger than I needed for what I did. I was a one-man section, and the truck would seat 6, typified the way that the bureaucracy of the Air Force works.
Yeah, well, that's so many stories have been told that are very similar to that.
There were that were in the same squadron, and we had been denied early release, which they were offering to everyone else in the United States. And the reason for it was that we were on a remote assignment, and that didn't make any sense. Regulations did not say that a remote assignment disqualified someone from being given an early release. Well, we wrote to a senator. His name was John Tower. And Senator Tower did his best to see to it that the Air Force treated us right, and he actually made a trip to Shemya on a trip to Vietnam, which was in full-blown action at the time. And Senator Tower decided to stop at Shemya for a few hours, and he joined us there and actually was instrumental in getting 4 of us out of the Air Force early.
Oh, okay. So he felt your pain.
A little better than that. He was a senator, and he brought the weight of his office to bear on our situation.
All right. But in spite of all of these obstacles, you say that you were able to turn your time there into something worthwhile, and something worthwhile enough to write about now.
Well, it's a book I had in my head for a very, very long time. And the action happened in 1968 and 69. And now, since I'm retired and looking for ways to occupy my time in a productive way, I spent the time doing this.
Good for you, Tom. Now keep going. From watching the first moon landing to satellites going up in space, John McNeese has long been a science fiction and an actual science buff, and now he's put that interest into a creative project, his first published book entitled The Tabori Team Project. John.
I had kind of had some ideas about what I thought the future could be, and in my high school years, I kind of started this way back when, just gathered ideas and put together kind of what I thought my vision of the future would be. About 100 years into the future, it's kind of a team-based group of kids that live on the new space station after some really bad things happen here on Earth. So it's not a bright and sunny future, but it's better than it was.
So they're out there, and what happens?
The main character, Kyle Galen, is a very bright boy. He's 16 when the story starts, and he has dreams of joining the Tabori team, which is the newest exploration team for space, which had been stopped because of an accident, and he takes upon himself to find out why it was shut down, and in hopes of fulfilling his dream of joining the team. He recruits 3 of his friends, and he runs into a adversary that has the opposite intentions. Of course, being 16 and parental restrictions, he has his goal set out for him. It's kind of a running story. It has the same characters in different situations, but this book is a story of its own.
Are you finding more time to write now?
Yeah, I have, because it's like I said, I had been putting together ideas for quite a while before I actually got the book, the first book completed, and then I kind of took those ideas. Something happened in the first book that I thought, that could be another whole story, and so it's kind of been leading me into other areas that the characters go into.
Yeah, that's so funny. So many people say that. It's like they said that, the characters tell me what to write. I'm not writing this.
It's for sure. I heard other authors say that, and I'm thinking, no, you're creating the characters. You have control, and I find that it is true that the characters, as long as you've got them thought out and have given them a backstory and you kind of know them like friends, they kind of take over sometimes.
And now John has several spin-offs that he plans to publish. And by the way, he's a college professor who teaches graphic design, and he designed his own cover. So really diving into that first-time publishing experience. Finally, Scott Whitney's been coming up with story ideas since he was a kid, but never got farther than character development and an outline until now. He took a year to focus on his passion, and he's completed his book, Inland Boulevard. So what'd you come up with, Scott?
Me and a buddy sat in a car actually for like 2 or 3 hours and just totally came up with a whole idea. Like characters, chapter ideas. Totally came up with the idea, and we were supposed to write it together, and he just ended up being so busy to where I was like, hey man, is it all right if I just write that story? And he's like, yeah man, I'm never gonna get to it. So we were supposed to write it together, but then I totally asked him, I was like, hey man, we developed this story, I don't want it to go to waste. Can I go ahead and write it? And he was like, yeah, go ahead and write it. So I wrote it out. So the story, Inland Boulevard, is pretty much like the city is fictitious. I came up with that on my own city. It's pretty much about a corrupt police captain and the organized crime of that city pretty much taking the city over, and then a 16-year-old kid trying to stop him. I don't want to give away too much of the story, because what I did was I pretty much took like a fairy tale story, like a old fairy tale story, and I modernized it. And made it as realistic as possible without like the whole, magical elements and all that. I just try to take it as realistic as possible and try and tell it like how it would be if it was like in a real setting.
What's the fairy tale story?
Well, I don't want to tell you because the way I wrote it is like you have to catch on. Like if I told it to you, then it would take away from the integrity of the story. Like once you start reading it, and you get like 4 or 5 chapters in, then you're gonna make that connection. Like, oh, it's that. And if I told you straight up what it was, then it would take away from it, like of what I tried to do.
And Enran Boulevard is the place that you came up with, the fictional place that you came up with where your story is set, and a 16-year-old kid becomes a sort of hero by fighting corruption and getting involved in things that he shouldn't get involved in. Now what happens?
Honestly, I'm working on a sequel right now. I'm like 15 chapters in. I mean, it's only into the rough draft, so I still have, like the first draft, second draft to go through, and then the final. But, I mean, I'm all the way up to chapter 15 of the sequel, which is pretty much a continuation. It doesn't even have the main character in from the first one, Inland Boulevard. It's some of the kids that he was with, like the aftermath and what their story involves.
Do you get any feedback?
Yeah. I've gotten some feedback. I mean, right now, like, this is my first one, so, I already knew it was going to be kind of tough to get recognized off of the very first book. Like, I mean, I tell my friends, I tell people, like, walking down the street, like, I wrote this book, check it out, and I have little flyers I can hand out to them and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've been doing my own little promotion on it, but, it's a still going process at the moment.
That's how you're letting people know about it. You're doing a real grassroots promotion.
Yeah, pretty much. And then on top of that, I got the Facebook, and then, Amazon like that. And like, I've had a couple of my family members and a couple of my friends that have either bought it, or read it, write a couple of reviews. So I'm trying to get it out there. It's all kind of foreign to me. So, the whole process is kind of slow.
You know what? It's like anything else. The more you do, the faster the process will go for you. Thanks, Scott. That's all the time we have for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thanks so much for tuning in or downloading us. You can download us anytime you want at 710WOR.iHeart.com. Thank you, my engineer, Rob Barrett. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're thinking about that book you want to write. And who knows, maybe you'll be a guest on the next Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. See you next time.